So if you can, to start off, can you, how long have you been fostering for?
About 23 years.
Okay. And why did you decide to get started in the first place?
Actually, I was taking a class, a master class, as a youth minister, and we were headed down to St. Vincent's, and part of what we did every quarter was to go to mass at the end of on Sundays as part of our training, and and I would see all the boys come in from the group home, and I just wanted to take them all home, and I would just try and figure out how many bunk beds could I get in my house because I just want all of them. They were just so cute, and they were serving. They were altar servers, and they all looked so cute. And it was the first time that I had actually thought about it. Um, so a 2-year program every 3 months, seeing them. Some of them were the same. Some of them were new kids that had just gotten there, and you could see the different. Like some came and they didn't want to sit, they didn't want to stand, they didn't want to participate with their group at home. But the next time I would come, they were part of that group, and I watched them grow, and I watched the people that were their leaders in their cabins or whatever, and I watched them work with them and just be so patient and accept them from exactly where they were. That it was just gnawing in the back of my head for a couple more years before I thought maybe I should at least look into it. And so that's when my search began.
So all told, how many youth have you had in your home?
I think 32 or 33, mostly teenagers
So
and
like
siblings.
teenagers, what kind of age range?
8th grade to 21. Um, I have had some sibling sets, that came, and the youngest I had was an 8-year-old, and then his 10-year-old brother, and then when the older brother was left my home, another 8-year-old came in. So I had a couple of 8-year-olds for a while. But in looking at what I am called to do as somebody who already works with high school and teenage youth, that it seemed like the better fit for me was teenagers. So that's what I'm drawn to.
Yeah, it's funny because I think some people have a very opposite reaction to foster teens specifically.
Right, right, right. They don't know what they're missing. I mean, you can have some great conversations with a teenager, and you can talk about life. You can be challenged. They come back and challenge you when you're trying to explain how a table is set, or why it's good to have good manners at the table. They challenge you, so you have to actually look at yourself and go, yeah, why is it important that I know what the right fork is, and I know how to, put the napkin in my lap and eat properly, because it helps me in society later on. It just makes it smoother for my life later on. So, and that was fun. That aspect of it alone. One of the girls went to a conference in either Indianapolis or St. Louis, one of the conferences that I went to. And there's a picture on my refrigerator right now that shows the place setting that we had at a very fancy function. Had 2 knives, 2 spoons, 3 forks, and she took a picture of it, and she felt so proud that she was the only one at her table of 8 that knew how to use, not panic. The rest of them were in panic mode. And I always said, well, when you go to the prom and you're in high school and you go to some fancy restaurant in San Francisco, you don't have to be so nervous about how to eat in public, because you already practice it, and it's just a tool. You can use it or not.
Yeah, I guess are there um, I guess when you first started, have kind of your thoughts and your opinions on like how to work with teens, has that changed or evolved at all?
It evolves with every single one that moves in. There are no two, well, we're not alike. So there's no two youth that come in from the same experiences. I guess when I first started, they asked me what behavior would I not accept in my household, and I had no idea what they were talking about. What behaviors are there? And then I discovered there were behaviors that I didn't have from my own sons that I wouldn't have known to mention. And then I constantly reflect on if my two boys had been in a situation where they had to go to a foster home, what would I want that foster home to be like? How would I want them to be treated? So I always have to stop myself and put that lens. If those are my kids, what would I want this foster parent to do for them? Because nobody knows them like I do. And how would I take care of them? How would I want them to be taken care of? And so it's a very fluid relationship. It's a dance, and each dance is different, and each one's a learning experience.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a good, every kid's different, every person's different, and what works for one person isn't going to work for someone else.
Right. You just can't put them in a box. It's just not going to work. You're not going to. I think it's hard for people who don't have the knowledge of foster youth. They will tell me, well, you just do this. Well, that might work with your kids, but there's a million different ways to respond in this moment. And basically, my tool usually is to sit on my hands and figure out, wait a minute, stop before you just react or do anything, and really see what's going on. Just sit back, just take a moment, take a breath. It's not about me. It's never about me.
Yeah, I am curious, Ethan, you touched on this a little bit, but when you tell people that you're a foster parent and that a foster parent to teenagers, no less, do you find that there's a lot of misconceptions out there in the public?
Right. Well, the first one is, what did they do wrong? It's not about them. It was a circumstance. I think they think it's juvenile hall, that they have committed some kind of crime. There's no place to put them, so they're in my home, and it's not that situation. Whatever the situation is that they got to this place, it wasn't their choice, and it wasn't their behavior. It was everything that happened the last 15 years that got them to this place. But people usually think I'm crazy. Why would you ever put teenagers in your home? I just find it exhilarating, as opposed to, I have grandchildren, and after 5 hours with the baby, I'm exhausted. Not to say that I'm not exhausted with the teenager sometimes too, but it's a different kind of exhaustion. I mean, you can verbally try and get to the bottom of something. With a baby, it's a different set of skills. And you're always trying to figure out what those are. But with a teenager, there's the signals are different. And so, yeah.
Yeah, so I think you had mentioned, so you've had both male and female
Right.
foster kids before.
Yeah. Yeah. That was by accident, actually. Well, that was a plan, but not my plan. I originally wanted only teenage boys because that's what I raised. And I had one, the first one, and he was 17. And after he left, after a couple of years, he left, and they asked if I would, have younger children. They needed somebody that was younger. And so I said, okay. And I had the siblings for a while, and then the other two 8-year-olds. And then, without thinking of what was going to happen down the road, with the 8-year-old, they asked if I would take an 8th grader. It was a girl. And I realized once that happened, it was fine with an 8-year-old and an 8th grade girl. I couldn't go back. When the little 8-year-old moved out, which he did and was going to, I then couldn't put teenage boys because the bedrooms are all upstairs and my bedroom is downstairs. So logistically, that didn't make sense for peace and harmony. So that eighth grade girl changed everything for me. So then I would end up normally having 4 teenage girls. At some point, it was 2 sets of sisters, and some, left, and the younger one would stay. And so a lot of them overlapped, but normally 4 teenage girls. Then when the laws changed, when they could stay till they were 21, they would stay longer, and that was great. And then some of them chose to stay longer. Once they had that option, though, it was funny, we wanted that option so badly, and then when it came, the ones who hit 18 wanted to leave. It's like, no, you have this opportunity to figure out where you are for the next 3 years. Don't go. But there were boyfriends, so they won. And it would have been great to have that next 3 years to be able to launch them into the JC. Because what I love doing is that senior year is very hard. It's very hard for anybody. It's especially hard for somebody in foster care. A lot of pressure, a lot of what's going to happen. Where do I go next? What do I do? I'm going to be 18, but it's like, even if you calm them down and say, but you don't have to go, but they don't know what they're going to do. Their friends are all making plans. And so it's a very hard time, and stressful. But if they can stay, then I like it better, because then they can go on into the junior college, or they can stay home for another year or two and then go on to a 4-year college. So some went, a couple have gone through law school, some have their bachelor's, and some are almost 30 and they're back in school. So there's a group that's between 23 and 30 right now that didn't go to college right away, but they're all 5 of them. I just looked at a picture from a scholarship luncheon that we had last year. 5 of them were getting scholarships, and heading on, which they said they would never go to college, and here they are. So, but that's fun to see them continue to grow.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure, like, as a foster parent, I imagine it's kind of immensely gratifying to see, people who, you knew what they were like when they were 16, 17, 18, and now they're, making really strong decisions for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And, there's no expectation. If you have the expectation that you're going to be thanked for anything, then you're in it for the wrong reason. So, like, do it out of your heart, for the good of somebody else, like you would want to be treated if you were in that situation and you had a lot of anxiety and you're brought into a stranger's home, and it's like, okay, there's your room, and maybe your own room, or maybe you have a roommate, and here you are, and I don't know if I could do it. So the resiliency, anyway, I'm always amazed that they handle it well. I would have been a lump somewhere if that had been me. I always admire them for being able to roll with it the best they can, from whatever situations, because some have never been in foster care before. This is their first experience, and they're 16 or 17. Others have been in the foster care system for many years and many, many different placements. And my goal is this is the last placement. And so I will hang in there, because I would want somebody to hang in there with my kids when they were making, dumb decisions. They made a bunch. My mantra used to be, please keep them safe until they get sane. And those are my biological kids.
Sure, absolutely. We've all been 17 once, unfortunately.
I know.
So I know it really varies by the person and the situation, but on average, would you say, like, how long are usually kids under your roof, as it were?
Because they come in at a later age. So the ones that came in as 8th graders stayed until they graduated from high school. The last few years, kids that have come in to my home have never been in foster care before, and they're backup boys, teenage boys. The girls all left, and it was an opportunity to go back and see if, what it would be like to be in a boy house again. And they came in at 17, 18 years old. And so they are, they're less, they stay less. One stayed 3 years. Um, and it wasn't supposed to necessarily be that long. Some have special needs, and there's a lot of help that the agency gives, and that you can get, to a placement so they can become independent. So it's like how many different resources can we find so that he can be independent. So it might take till 21. The last one was 17, and he went back home, but to his own family, and things have calmed down. It could be that I'm just this little break. For the most part, though, it's long term. Most of my girls, as I look around at the pictures and all my grandkids' pictures that they have given me, it's been 3 years, 5 years, somewhere in there.
Are you still in touch with some of the kids who used to live with you?
Oh, mostly, almost every day, actually. Um, when the girls are having, problems with their spouse or significant other, I get the 10 o'clock call at night. I've been at the birth of so many little babies that my girls have asked me to be there. And that's really a privilege to be there for a birth. I don't know if I would have asked, a bunch of, anybody else to come to my birth. My mom didn't even go in, I don't think, so to have me in there is like quite a privilege, and to be able to see. So when you see those babies born, they're your grandchildren. They go on the things. So typically, until I moved to this little rental, typically there were 30 stockings that were hung up at Christmas, because they come back and their kids come back. And so, Christmas and Easter, Thanksgiving, they now have their own families. So they're kind of growing up and making their own traditions, but they know that when the family blast goes out, what are you going to bring? That they can say, oh, going to have this at my house this year, miss you guys, or we'll drive by for pie afterwards. But it's a family, and it's not a family that we made. It was the family we all chose. We chose each other, and we continue to choose each other. And my sons call them their brothers and sisters. And the girls especially refer to my sons as their brothers. So we have lots of cousins. So, yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah, it is nice. It's a perk.
A lot of people for Christmas, though.
A lot of people, and this is a little rental. Well, I build my other one, and I was like, can we get all these people in on a rainy day? I don't know, but we made it work.
And what county?
Sonoma County.
Sonoma. Okay. And I'm curious as well. So it sounds like there's been a number of sibling pairs over the years as well. Do you try to ensure that you can keep siblings together when you can? Have you found that there's a difference when you bring in siblings versus, say, just...
I didn't look for siblings in particular. I was always offered. So it's a different experience for sure. The one time I had 4 girls, and there were 2 sets of sisters, but the first, so I had one set that came right after Christmas, and they, at that point, there weren't any other people, so they each got their own room. It was just a cycle, so they each got their own room. And then another girl came, and she paired up with one of those girls, and so because the other one, wanted their own room. At some point, the 2 sisters, each of them were with their non-sibling, and they came down one night and wanted to, like, we want to be with our sister, and we want to share a room with our sister. I'm an only child, so I had to step back and go, I don't know how that feels, and let me just think about it. But what I thought was going to happen, what I saw was going to happen, was the two sets of siblings were going to stay in their room and not come down again. And they were going to stay off by themselves. They weren't going to interact with each other or with me. So I said no. And we just talked about it a few months ago with one of the girls who's now 23, and she said that was the best decision ever. I really wanted you to say no, but I didn't, want my sister to hear that. But she said it would have been horrible. We would have fought all the time. She would have manipulated me. So I don't know. It's one of those things you have to go with your gut, and you have to. If it didn't work, I mean, we tried it, and all four of them would come down, and when they would do dishes at night, all four of them would be in the kitchen singing show tunes, like Rent or whatever. I don't know that would have happened if they had stayed. Each sibling set had been in their own room and not come down. So yeah, it's a different experience for sure. For me, because I never had any. So.
Sure. Um, I'm curious. I know there's, you've worked with a number of different kids, over the years, but is there any sort of like one particular scenario that like really kind of sticks in your mind?
One. Okay, so, edit as you see this. There was, I learned something from one of the girls who was the 8th grader who moved in, and at about the 3-month rate, there's something about they're in, and then there's something that happens at the 3-month state where the honeymoon period is over, and they're trying to decide, like, are you okay, not okay, can I really be me? And so this one night, this girl was in the fetal position in the family room and crying, and my instinct was, it was about midnight, so my instinct was to go over and go to her, and she lashed out. So I knew that this is not like a 2-year-old that I can pick up and put somewhere. I need to figure this out. I can't go back to bed. That doesn't seem safe. So I sat near her, and she was lashing, and it's like, okay. So I moved away to the couch, and I just sat there, and she cried for about a half an hour for her mom, and it just broke my heart. I want my mommy. And there's this girl who's like 13, 14, and she's just crying for her mommy, and I can't get near her. And so I just sat there on the couch, and after about a half an hour, she walked over. And I mean, she didn't walk over, she crawled across the room and got up on the couch and put her head in my lap. And that's all she needed. And that's all I did. But I learned from that the best way with her was to just be, because when she would get upset, it wasn't the last thing that just happened. It wasn't what her roommate did or didn't do. It was a buildup of a lot of anxiety and a lot of things she was going through. And so she's, 27 now, college graduate. She's learned how to, like work with therapy, work with all of her gifts, know when things are going poorly, how to reach out appropriately, how to take care of herself. And so, I mean, my whole family's very proud of her. She's considered my daughter that I never had. And she's just a major part of the family. Who would have known, though, that when that girl at the 3-month mark was in a fetal position, that it would end up like this? You just don't know. So that's one. There's a whole bunch. There's so many.
One thing I'm curious, we found sometimes that for certain people, it's they foster for a certain amount of time, and that sort of is what works for them. You've been fostering for for over 2 decades now. I mean, what keeps you going? What keeps you to keep wanting to do this?
There have been moments when I thought, well, maybe this is time to stop, and I always get messages. So at that time, I'm really open to like, what am I supposed to do next? And I might go to the mailbox and there might be a card or a letter from one of them or a phone call. Um, and it's, random, something that would pop up and I go, okay, I'm not ready to quit yet. I'm not ready to give it up. If this is what, if I can help somebody, and the most important thing is not to fill the house, but do I match what they need? Because I'm a single parent. So, if there's no other person to turn, like, okay, your turn, to hand the baton to for a while. So I don't want them to have one more, um, placement, one more rejection in their life. So if I can't look at this and go, oh, they're 10, no, that's not for me, because that means I'm there till 21 and I don't have that much in me. But, if they're right now, if they're 17, 18, and it looks like they only need somebody for 3 months and here's the plan and, whatever, then it's like, yes, if that person, after we meet and we have a conversation at Starbucks and we both, it has to be mutual, they have to want to be here too. Um, and, I've had somebody say, no, she doesn't have a cat, or no, she has a cat. And it's like that's their power. I mean, that's the only power they get, right? Is to say no to a foster parent, because their life, they don't really have much control in their life at that point. So I respect their no. I don't take it personally at all. And if we usually, there's questions, there's times that have come up. It's like, is this really working? Am I the best person? But when we're totally honest, both the social workers and myself, and say, this is not about you. It's not about if the house, it runs a certain way, but are we the right match for each other? Because it seems like we're missing something, or I'm not the right one for you, that, or you have expectations. They have expectations about what if their foster parent's going to be too. Whatever that dream is, or that, I don't know, nightmare, whatever it is. And, it's like, here I am, and we're two strangers, and all of a sudden, oh, that's what you look like? Huh. Maybe I don't want to go to your house. Maybe I don't want to check it out. So I think as long as I keep getting signals that this is the time, or this is the time to, like, move on and be open to that, that it works. Not because, like, it does bother me right now that there's two beds open, but I can't have anyone because of my age, that, they're not, teens not necessarily stay put. So it's just too risky for me. But I've never had two beds, there's, the beds are made, the pillows on it, the dresser's there, everything's ready. Um, and it feels odd not to be able to open my house and to say, sure, come on in for a while.
Yeah, I was going to ask what the situation is. Obviously during this pandemic, it definitely puts a wrinkle in things.
Yeah, it was very hard for the last young man that was with me, because he's basically cooped up in a cage. And going to school online was not working for him. It was very hard. So luckily he could go home. It was, we had to remind ourselves that, because in my mind he was like, he's here. But then we reminded ourselves that we only made a 3-month commitment, and it's over 3 months anyway. So wait a minute. If his dad's in a place where he can, has a house now, can have him back, then yeah. I hope you felt comfortable and welcomed and taken care of while you were here. So, and then I get to see him as I drive through McDonald's, and there he is.
Nice. Um, and you mentioned, a few times kind of like the work that you have with like caseworkers and social workers. And so good, bad, or indifferent. I'm curious what your experience has been with AFS.
Oh, I am the preacher of AFS. The first social worker that I had him for 2 years until we moved, and I was brokenhearted that he was going to leave. Um, and another one for 2 years. And then after that, I had the same social worker for 7 years at a time. And they were part of our family. They still are part of my family. They go to all the birthday parties that the foster kids still have. They know who their children are. They've been to the baby showers. They've been to the bridal showers. They share, we share books with each other. So even over the years as AFS has made changes, the social workers and the people who come to my wraparound services, all of that, totally taken care of, 24/7. And believe me, I've had calls where I've called at 3 in the morning, and they've been right here, or gone to the hospital and they sit there with me the whole time until we figure it all out. So I don't know how you could do this work, especially as a single person, without the AFS staff. I mean, they know, it's like I mentioned to the county one time, like when different foster parents were talking about what they needed, and I couldn't say anything, and finally they turned to me and said, "Don't you need any of that?" And I said, "I get all that. My kids get all that. They're asking for stuff that's just automatic with AFS." So, and the person that was leading the meeting said we could never compete. I went, "Oh, I hear that," and I was not aware that I was taking care of, more than the average there. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I know you've I guess it sounds like you were mentioning at the beginning that you have kind of given talks. When you are talking to people who are thinking about becoming foster parents, what do you typically tell them? What advice would you give?
Well, I tell them if it's in their head and they're thinking about it, then they need to go investigate, because it was just constantly in the back of my mind. And if it's back there, there must be a reason. If that keeps coming up for you and you're thinking about it, at least go to a meeting, go find out about it. You owe it to yourself, and you owe it to the kids too. We do. They are all of ours. It takes a village as a statement, but it takes more than a village sometimes. So everybody that they come in contact has a stake in their lives. So we have a stake in their lives. So I just think if that thought goes through your mind, then you need to go investigate. And don't feel guilty if it's not for you now, because my process was probably a 3-year process before I had somebody actually move in. It came in my mind and it went out, and then it would come back in. It's like, oh, and then how could I do that? I don't know if I can do that. I'm a single person. Do they allow that? And I'm a person who also works at the church. It's like, are they gonna not want that? I mean, what are all the rules that go with this? And I would say I was thoroughly vetted, as they say, and asked about who I am, and I appreciated that, because I would want somebody to do that for my kids.
Fantastic. Well, I think those are all of the questions that I had. I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to add or clarify.
Oh, I don't know. It's just there's so many experiences. And this was not my choice to do. I didn't go through high school and go off and get married and have kids, and nowhere on that was, this is where I'm going to be at this age and within these experiences. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. I have learned so much. If you love to learn and you love to be with, sit with people, my preference, of course, my bias is with teens. And so everyone is different. Some of them want to sit on, the end of your bed and talk about life. And some of them want to be, with their headphones on. But you figure out how to do the dance. And I absolutely love it. I do miss it. This might be the way that I retire, because I apparently wasn't doing it on my own. apparently it has to be a pandemic. So to say, okay, maybe you should stop now. I don't know. Because I was wondering how I was ever going to not do this, but apparently that came about.
Well, yeah, thank you so much for your time and your participation. I appreciate it. Good luck with everything.